Sleep Awake is a perfect title for this game that I practically fell asleep to on 2 different occasions. It's essentially just a playable melatonin. All the jokes aside, Sleep Awake is a new indie horror game that has 2 head creators behind it, one being Robbie Flick, who is the guitarist for 9 Inch Nails, and Corey Davis, who was the lead game designer on Spec Ops: The Line. Personally, I love 9 Inch Nails, and I also love Spec Ops: The Line. So this was a pretty easy sell for me. I was very excited to play Sleep Awake. I was willing to chalk out a full $30 to play this trippy Blumhouse-produced horror game. But unfortunately, I was incredibly disappointed. Like, Jesus, they dropped the ball on this thing. I want to even point out ahead of time, I didn't even finish this freaking thing. I watched the last hour of it on YouTube because it reaches a point where you feel like you're basically just watching a movie. And I was also just finding it incredibly boring to play through. This really might be my least favorite horror game of the year that I've personally played so far. I want to start with something positive though, something to appreciate considering the channel's name, and that is the weird spiritual world that you inhabit that was struck by a tragedy known as the Hush, where if people fall asleep, they end up in a dangerous place where they could go missing or die. Our main character keeps herself awake with an elderly woman by infusing a bunch of different drugs that causes her to hallucinate and keeps us in a constant state of psychosis. Whenever you're in psychosis, the trippy sequences and the music are what causes the game to excel. It makes Sleep Awake feel like it's the equivalent of hanging out with that stoner friend of yours who listens to Pink Floyd, asking the questions about what's the point of life. Sleep Awake asks us a bunch of interesting questions about its world, and it's a vibe to hang out with, but after hitting the doobie and it doesn't elaborate on any of it, any of its world, any of those questions, it just doesn't feel worthwhile at all. Instead of the game being as interesting as the world it's presenting, it ultimately just feels like that pretentious art student showing off his collection of modern art and not explaining the point of any of it. Sleep Awake's only problem isn't that it's not as interesting as its visuals, it's also that the moment it becomes interesting, it ends. It's a $30 game for a 3-hour long experience. I just got done playing Horses, and that was a $5 game that was 3 hours to 4 hours long, and it was more interesting than this is. And I want to be honest, I would pay $30 for some games that are short, like Inside from 2016, but Sleep Awake is no Inside. There's things like Animal Well, Stray, Journey, and so many other short games that $30 doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me because they have constant gameplay and they're a beautiful experience. Whereas Sleep Awake feels more like a walking slideshow. It's a narrative-driven experience with not really much narrative to even go off of. The narrative also doesn't really feel confident in itself. It's like the world is there, the story is there, the tragedies, the events, the everything that made the world what it is all there. It just doesn't really feel tapped into. I'm getting tired just talking about it. I honestly contemplated not even making this review just because the game really did just bore me. The actual gameplay of Sleep Awake is in the form of stealth sections like your typical survival horror experience, you know, like the hide underneath tables, hide around stuff, get around your enemies, but it is the most excruciatingly bland version of this. In this one in particular, it's so bland because the enemies have the most obvious patterned AI systems I've seen in a video game in probably years. You know exactly where an NPC is going to walk. They're going to walk in a straight line to there, and then they're going to turn around and go right back. It even looks animatronic when you're watching it. They're going to walk in one direction, they're going to turn around, repeat that over and over, and it's so painfully obvious. They don't try to mix it up at all. And let's say you get caught by these enemies. How do you think it's going to go for you? Do you think you're going to have a struggle? You think you're going to have a tough time? You're going to have to hide from them again? No. You can just run for the exit of the area that you're in, and the exit will just force a door shut so none of the enemies can follow you through the door. So really, not only is the stealth also boring, there's no mechanics that add to anything to make it more interesting than just hide behind a wall until you see the pattern and then you just walk right past the enemy. But also, worst of all, you can just skip over the entire section by just running through everything, so nothing is scary. And that's the biggest sin that you can make in a psychological horror game, is that nothing is scary. Oh my god, you see what you're doing to me, Sleepawake? You're making me tired. The strong suits of Sleepawake really come from the world building, specifically more towards the first half of the game. Lord knows that the first hour is gonna feel slow for you. I did not enjoy the first hour of this game. I almost just dropped out immediately. I dropped out by the end of the second hour, but the techno sound effects and music complement this steampunkish environment with all of its wacky enemy designs that show off the lengths people will go to not fall asleep in this world. I love all that. That's all really cool, and I think that actually really shows off the Robbie Flick side of the creators, because he's the guitarist of Nine Inch Nails, and Nine Inch Nails is a very creative group. They like to do kind of weirdish stuff with their music, and I think you really see that in Sleepawake. The techno music also fits in perfectly with the trippy visuals, giving the full psychedelic feeling world where you can never tell what's real or what isn't when you're about to go into a dream state. You don't even know when it's really happening to you until it's already happening. You'll spend the first hour of the game doing something, then wake up and not know if anything you just did for the last hour was real or not. And that's awesome. That's really cool. Sleepawake even does this with your death. When you die, you go down a hallway that's built and you open up a door entering the last checkpoint that you got, which makes it seem like that your death could just be chalked up to a hallucination or a dream. That is an excellent way to present death and respawning in a world where people shouldn't fall asleep. It's honestly so refreshing to see another game take death and do something with it in its universe rather than just ignoring it and just having the standard respawning. I want to figure out a way I can recommend this because I really like to see the best in things. I do. I really always want to see the best in everything. So if you're looking for a game that can be a bit of a vibe to walk through in 3 hours, it's not that bad. Works, it functions, it looks really pretty, and it achieves with a lot of the psychedelic elements, but it's not worth more than $10. The fact that this thing was $30 is one of the worst parts about it. It feels like a ripoff because there's nothing mechanically interesting going on. The game isn't even like beautiful enough, really, in my opinion, to justify $30. Like maybe Inside could be that much, or Journey, but that's because those games to me are gorgeous, have a beautiful art style, whereas even the prettiest parts of Sleepawake normally look like they're filmed with a live action camera or they're just a cutscene. There's nothing mechanically going on here that I would ride home about. It's a vibe game that has some bad stealth sections, but has some pretty visuals. I wish the best of luck to both the creators though. I think if you see this thing on sale and you're looking for that trippy, cool little experience, then maybe give it a shot. It might be more up your alley than it was mine. I've been listening to tons of the Tron Ares soundtrack by Nine Inch Nails. If you haven't heard that, go out and listen to it. If you want to support these creators separately, I recommend playing Spec Ops: The Line. I think that game is brilliant. It's one of my favorite military shooters out there. And another thing I want to give credit to on Sleepawake before ending this is that both of these gentlemen created a new studio together called Eyes Out. And it has the goal of making more experimental games. And I think Sleepawake kind of falls flat in a lot of its areas, but Sleepawake is one of their first games, and I really hope they get the chance to do something that is really experimental in the future. Because I think the visuals here, some of the cutscenes, some stuff can be experimental. The music is really creative, and I love the idea of this company that's tackling new and experimental visions for future projects, and I wish them the best with that. I hope they get another shot with it. This is a much shorter review than we're probably used to, but I really just don't have a lot to say. Comment down below if there's any other games you recommend me playing and reviewing on this channel, and if your comment is selected, then I will make a video on that game and I will put your comment in the beginning. Like and subscribe if you want a review on all the new horror games that come out, because you already know what we do on this channel. We're going to be appreciating every single little piece of horror out there, and I will always appreciate you.